all our listeners and viewers, those of you joining us on the National Television Network, as well as on Facebook, YouTube, and WVNT for our regular updates at the Information Command Center here at the studios of the Government Information Center. Thanks also to all our other media houses, RCI, Hot FM, Hot 7 TV, The Wave, HTS Radio 100, NBC Real FM, DBS, Blazing FM, Vibe Radio for connecting with us throughout the days and weeks and bringing the information to the public at large. Today, our focus will be on the National Meals Program, as first announced by the Prime Minister of St. Lucia as part of St. Lucia's national response to COVID-19. In a moment, we will introduce you to our in-studio guest. But first, a recap of some of the latest developments. On Friday, it was announced that the construction sector would reopen as of today, April 27. Reopening will involve both private and public construction sites, providing that all of the necessary protocols are adhered to. The Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Infrastructure spoke on the reopening.
In preparation for the reopening of, for example, particularly the public sector construction, we at the Department of Labor have started preparing for this eventuality, and it's very likely that it will happen on Monday. And then we're now asking that construction firms, quarries, and will seek permission under, the emergency powers, disasters, COVID-19 curfew to reopen. So we're now putting the necessary protocols in place. We've dialogued with the Office of the Chief Medical Officer. We've developed some protocols. These protocols, we have also developed some for occupational safety and health that we're now putting together, and then we're going to be passing this on and informing various construction companies to adhere to those protocols. For example, what we are mainly concerned about at this point, not that we're ignoring the occupational safety and health, which is part of the Labor Act or Labor Code as most persons would refer to it. We are now putting protocols for COVID-19. One, we want sanitation measures in place. We want to ensure that there's physical distancing, 6 feet apart. We want there to be on-site, sort of a site preparation protocol, site transportation protocol, staff to have the necessary PPEs, and when we say PPEs, to have the mask, to be adorned with masks, to be adorned with their construction gloves and all of these matters. Even prior to persons arriving on site, there should be and will be protocols prior to that to determine how do we invite persons onto a site. And while they're on site, if someone were to get ill, how else do you deal with those matters of illness? Even when they are now operating on the site, the physical distancing, the whole issue of social distancing, how do we now determine and do we allow visitors to be on site? All of those matters will be discussed. There are protocols also for leaving the site. When you leave, prior to leaving the site, one would ensure that persons wash their hands, they sanitize, and you sanitize the site as well, that they sign the register to ensure that one accounts for everybody. So all of these protocols, we are asking that construction companies, quarries, and concrete sites to adhere to. They will need to apply to the Department of Labor. We will be making the form available online at www.govt.lc. There is a telephone number of 4600808 that we would want persons to call if they have any further queries or concerns. That is on the construction site. There will also be an email, labordepartmentslu@gmail.com, that they would be submitting the applications to, as well as ps.infrastructure@govt.lc. So these will be made available on the government website, will be available in the public domain, in order that the construction companies can know exactly where they should be supplying or making those applications, retrieving the applications as well as submitting the applications for them to now reach. I can tell you right now, government since the shutdown of the construction sector, there are a number of projects. I can think of 11 projects that off my lookups that we want to reinstate and continue immediately, plus some others that are more on sort of not some medium-sized construction that we would like to continue. That's on public sector, that is government. And there are many other private sector construction that has been stopped at this point that we want to reinstate.
It's interesting, a while ago you mentioned the protective gear, and I could recall Minister Guy Joseph earlier on this week in another interview stating that some of the protocols we are looking at presently, like wearing face masks, etc., these should have been general practices even without the threat of COVID. So is it now that we're going to see a revision of some of our health and safety practices on construction sites here in St. Lucia?
Yes, you are correct. The Labor Act, Labor Act Chapter 16.04 requires under the occupational safety and health that some of the protective, personal protective equipment for construction site, like hard hats, footwear, gloves, safety goggles, coveralls, and even when persons are operating at heights, there should be scaffolds, should be ensured that the scaffold is actually reviewed and assessed by a competent person. There should be nets and harnesses that person should be using when at on those sites. This we want to ensure that we enforce those. We're not saying that everything with COVID seemed to have really jump-start and reinstated a lot. It has sort of sent us back in that reflective mode that we definitely need to be able to comply with a number of those requirements of the law that we seem to have ignored over the years of just giving scant regard to. So we definitely have to be able to ensure that we've done this. We will beef up our capacity. We will be working, and we're not alone, because like I mentioned, the CMO and the environmental health, these units will be supporting us in this regard. So these are really a health issue brought about principally by COVID-19. It has caused everyone to reflect. It has caused departments now to come together, to work together to ensure that we make St. Lucia a safer place, not only with regards to health, but we're speaking about safety as well. And even now that with COVID-19, you hear everybody saying, be safe. And safe is not necessarily, now that one is more of a respiratory kind of safety, but we are also need to speak about general safety. One of the anxieties that staff, you would find persons would have, is the issue of transportation. This time around, if we think of it, on the last line they would speak about visit, workers must follow the site transportation protocol. Even then, perhaps the employees would be thinking of how does the employer think about put together what sort of site transportation protocol. So how do you get to the site? How do you move on the site if it is a very large site? And how do you get transported out of that site? Do you allow for visitors to come to the site? How do you do this? If there are to be deliveries on the site, how many persons should be making those deliveries? All of those matters are critical because we need to maintain that social distances, that physical distance, 6 feet apart. How do you ensure that those things happen while you continue to be as efficient as possible and productive on the construction site? So a lot of those matters are coming to the fore, and we're providing those guidelines, and we expect the cooperation of all persons involved and all parties in the construction sector. We want to now ensure that there is a certain level of construction and activity in the economy, and so we now supportive of this effort.
And that was the update there coming from the Department of Infrastructure with the reopening of the construction sector. We have also been informed that the Cabinet of Ministers have agreed that fabric stores and haberdashery operations will be allowed to reopen. And we heard from the Minister for Economic Development as well as Transport, Honorable Guy Joseph, and he spoke specifically on the transport sector earlier this morning. It was announced that the minibuses carrying 14 passengers will be allowed to carry 9 passengers, with the 10th person being the driver. All of the necessary protocols must be adhered to. In other words, all passengers and the driver must wear their mask. We were also informed that the Vieux-Fort to Castries and Castries to Vieux-Fort buses will begin to operate from this week on a limited basis. All passengers must show proof of having valid reason to be moving from one zone to the next to be allowed to move between those zones. A reminder that the zoning that was implemented as a measure to combat COVID-19 is still in place. The same protocols have also been extended to the buses from Soufrière to Castries and Castries to Soufrière. Again, all of the protocols must be adhered to. And last night we heard from the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Honorable Alan Chastanet, speaking on the state of the economy ahead of this week's budget address. Some of the talking points from the budget, from his statement last night, was the drop in government's revenue, which he described as being quite alarming. For example, in April 2017, we collected, well, government that is, 70 million. In 2018, 87 million, the month of April. And in 2019, it was 101 million. And for this April to date, government have only collected $40 million. So this paints an economic picture as to where we are today. The Prime Minister also spoke about civil servant salaries, which are paid monthly from government revenues. And looking at the drop of 60% reduction, it puts government in a tight fiscal position when it comes to salaries of civil servants. We take a break, and when we come back, our guests will be discussing the National Meals Program.
Virus ready to harm us. Panic is not the answer. We can win this together. Often use hand sanitizer, better yet use soap and water.
We must protect each other if we are to beat this corona.
Together let us win this war. Be a soldier for St. Lucia. Together let us win this war. Be a soldier, together we can beat this corona.
So you don't become the next case. Avoid touching your face. I'm sure you've been told so. Handshakes and hugging are up. No, no.
Advice give you the please. Cover your mouth and your nose if you cough or sneeze.
Practice social distancing and avoid large social gatherings.
Together let us win this war. Be a soldier for St. Lucia. Together let us win this war. St. Lucia, be a soldier. Together we can beat this corona.
For further information, please contact the hotline at 311 or the Bureau of Health Education at 468-5349.
And welcome back. Today we're discussing the National Meals Program. As I said earlier on, we first heard of this initiative from the Prime Minister, Honorable Alan Chastanet. But let us just set the platform here. The World Food Program and the United Nations have said that global hunger could double due to COVID-19. A number of countries have started to put measures in place, including St. Lucia. Before we talk about what exactly we are doing here in St. Lucia, let's take a look at the global picture from this video.
At the same time, while we're dealing with COVID-19 pandemic, we're also on the brink of a hunger pandemic. I was saying that 2020 would be facing the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II and more frequent natural disasters and changing weather patterns that we're experiencing. Millions of civilians living in conflict-scarred nations, including many women and children, face being pushed to the brink of starvation with the specter of famine a very real and dangerous possibility.
Now that we put it all in context, let me introduce our guest here today. We have with us Ms. Dorine Gustave, Director of NEMO, a very busy lady lately.
Very busy.
As well as Mrs. Lorraine Sidonie, CEO of the events company of St. Lucia. We heard then a report from David Beasley of the World Food Organization, 265 people worldwide being pushed to extreme poverty and hunger, 135 million people in 55 low and middle income countries, places like the Caribbean, Venezuela, and what have you. We have reacted or acted early, I would say. Let's talk about how this whole project got started, the National Meals Program.
Okay, with the shutdown, the total shutdown of the country when it was announced, the PM also announced the initiative that will put in place to ensure that persons are cared for during that time. And those persons would be the vulnerable shut-ins, those persons who would fall under the public assistance list, most of all. And they were the ones that were in the front line or the forefront of this. And so the National Meals Program was initiated in order to ensure that we buffer that need. We ensure that we get the meals to those persons on which falls in that category. Yeah.
And this is certainly a collaborative effort. What is the role of the events company St. Lucia in this whole effort?
Okay, thank you for having me. When the initiative was discussed, I think it was then realized that the number of stakeholders involved needed some sort of central management. So it was a NEMO initiative, but it involves a lot of other stakeholders. So we're talking about Ministry of Social Equity, Ministry of Agriculture, Marketing Board, Farmers Co-op, Chamber of Commerce, of course, St. Lucia Hotel and Tourism Authority, the SLHTA, and of course, at the center of it are the persons we're trying to get the help to, the vulnerables. So they needed, I guess, an agency, an organizing body to pull all the pieces together, given the number of stakeholders. So events, I guess, because we're planners, we plan events and we plan other things as well. We were called upon to coordinate and to pull the pieces together so that the supply chain of getting the food ready, in fact, from the raw ingredients to getting the food to the beneficiaries, was a seamless, as much as possible, event.
Okay, talking about the seamless event, let's talk about the process from preparation, from planning to preparation to distribution. Let's talk in practical terms how this is carried out.
Okay, yes, so of course it starts with the raw materials and getting the raw materials to the kitchens. And I need to mention the kitchens because it's such a great show of charity that we have between 12 to 16 kitchens. And this initiative is going to happen, well, it happened Easter Sunday. Let me just put it into context. It happened on Easter Sunday. It happened yesterday, but yesterday is the first of a 3-day week. It's happening this week.
Okay.
So it happened yesterday, it's happening on Wednesday and Friday. And each time that happens, we're talking about 3,500 meals. So just the sheer magnitude, I mean, you could imagine what has to happen behind the scenes for 3,500 meals to be prepared and delivered to the homes of the recipients. So yes, it's quite an interesting supply chain and it calls for a lot of pulling together of pieces. So we have the raw ingredients. We need to get the raw ingredients, and there we have the Ministry of Agriculture, we have the Marketing Board, we have the farmers, and we have private sectors as well, all contributing to that process. The raw materials have to get to the kitchens, and then the meals have to be prepared. We have between 12 to 16 kitchens preparing the meals. If you wish, I can call them out.
Sure,
yes. I mean, yesterday, I will just, the ones that were in it yesterday, we had Bay Gardens, Coco Palm, Sandals Grand, Landings, Windjammer, June's Catering, Pink Papaya, Marigold Bay Resort, the Dennery Youth and Sports. They came together as well to prepare meals. I mean, they actually prepared 150 meals. Ladera Resort, Jade Mountain, Fordu, and Coconut Bay. So those are the kitchens that were on board yesterday, and they collectively prepared 3,600, I think exactly 3,625 meals. So the kitchens now, and this is where SLHTA plays an important role, because SLHTA is now pulling that part together, making sure that the raw materials get to the kitchens and that the kitchens are preparing the meals for distribution. The first time we did it on Easter Sunday, we had a variety of meals, and it meant more to the management, because one kitchen was doing bouillon, one was doing a saltfish, one was doing the typical Sunday meal, and it became a little challenging trying to pull all that together. So yesterday we had a standardized meal, a lovely meal of macaroni pie, a medley of local vegetables, rice, baked chicken, and peas. So a very simple but tasty meal, and all the kitchens prepare that in their own way. All right, so that has to happen for the kitchens to prepare the meal. Then we need now for NEMO and the Cadet Corps. I hadn't even mentioned them. Hi, Colonel Hyacinth. So their team now had to step in to pick up the meals from these kitchens, so from these 12 kitchens. Then we had to try to match kitchens with the local constituencies, and again I need to call out the councils, our local governments, the mayors. So we had to now take these meals from the kitchens to the local communities. So NEMO and the Cadet Corps, they very helpful. So again, it tells you how much organizing has to happen. So that's that phase of it. And then when it gets to a central location in each community, it now has to get to the 3,500 or 3,600 homes, and the National Volunteer Program was key in allowing that to happen, along with the local councils. So that's a summary of the supply chain we're looking at, that gets it from raw materials to finished meal in the hands of the recipient.
So we're actually looking at another set of frontline heroes coming to the fore in this whole pandemic. You mentioned earlier about the raw material, and lately agriculture has been front, center, all over the necessity of agriculture. Talk a little bit more about the collaborative effort, Ministry of Agriculture. I think you mentioned the Food Marketing Cooperative, what have you. Talk a little more about this collaboration.
Okay, so the idea was to ensure that those farmers who were impacted, and we know that they were impacted because they had no vendors to sell to, some of the places were shut down and so on. Those farmers who would have these produce there, would have no market to take it to, would get somewhere or get some means of financial reprieve during this time. And so the idea was to get the raw material from the farmers and to get it to the kitchens in order to provide for those persons who are the target groups. And so the farmers were contacted, and the marketing board, like you've heard, was the entity in charge of getting this produce from the farmers and then to deliver them to the various kitchens. So the farmers now that's another set of persons that are being impacted through this National Meals Program.
Okay. You also mentioned earlier on the Cadet Corps, and my good friend Lucius Lake and Cyril Elise. Do not forgive me if I didn't ask for some elaborate information as far as the Cadet Corps, because not only with this National Meals Program, but a number of your other initiatives, NEMO, the Cadet Corps has always been there with you guys.
Always been. So the Cadet Corps is part of NEMO. Well, we have what we call the Supplies Committee. That's one arm of the NEMO system. At the head of that Supplies Committee is Colonel Hyacinth, Nathan Hyacinth, who is the head of the Cadet Corps here. The cadet, at any given emergency, the cadets on board with NEMO. So they come on board for distribution. They do the heavy lifting. They are the ones who push.
They don't need to go to the gym after NEMO.
No, they don't. So they'll come and they assist with in whatever way that deem important at the time or necessary at the time. So through Colonel Hyacinth, they brought the guys on board, and they were always ready and willing to assist with the heavy lifting, to delivering whatever it is that you call them upon to do. And you know, indeed we want to thank them. Thank them for that service. Over the years, you know, they have come in and stepped in and done what they're supposed to do to bring assistance to those persons who are in need out there.
The other group I must mention, and in a minute we'll just take a look at a quick video, the chefs, the kitchen staff.
Yes.
I watched some of those videos, and these guys are having fun doing this. They really look like they're enjoying what they're doing. Let's just take a look at one of the video clips from one of the kitchens.
All right, good morning, St. Lucia, and we're here at Coco Palm Hotel today, Sunday, and we're preparing for the National Meals Program again. And this morning here at Coco Palm, we're preparing 600 meals, which will be distributed to various parts of, I think, Castries. So we're just, you know, going through what's been prepared. I think the guys right now, they have some machine being diced, and some plantains being prepared. And the chef over here is preparing some protein. And today the goal is to prepare 4,000 meals. Good morning, St. Lucia. Alright, so we're here at the Windjammer Landing Villa Beach Resort, and the guys, the chefs here are preparing for the National Meals Program. Right now they're plating. So we're at the Windjammer Landing Villa Beach Resort, and the chefs right now, they're plating the dishes for the National Meals Program, and everything looks really, really nice, well organized. And just want to thank all the chefs and the staff at the Windjammer Landing Villa Beach Resort for participating in this program. We really appreciate their support in this time of crisis, the coronavirus crisis right here affecting all the islands in the Caribbean, affecting the world. So we want to thank the Windjammer staff for their support, and we are currently preparing for the National Meals Program. So show your support, guys. Share this video. Let us show St. Lucians what we could do when we come together, and thank the Windjammer Landing staff right here. We have,
and that was a look at one of the kitchens preparing some of those meals. And again, looking at those videos, one could see that, you know, it's not any second-rate food being prepared there. It's like any meal that you'll get at any national event.
Yes.
A lot of care. Even watching the chefs, the protocols, wearing the face mask and what have you. How are you able to respond? How do you get a list of the persons in need?
Okay, so like Mrs. Sidonie mentioned earlier, the Ministry of Equity, they are the ones responsible for the vulnerable in St. Lucia.
Okay.
And so they would have a list of persons on the public assistance program. We have the churches came on board, the various community groups who came on board, and the councils to put together this list to ensure that those persons who are on the list are those who are most in need. And this list is made available to Mrs. Sidonie, myself. And so we are able to know how many persons we're targeting in the various communities. And so this list was what we followed in order to ensure that those persons are reached. I want to also mention that from the Ministry of Equity, We have the social transformation officers on board, as well as the welfare officers. Even the PS of equity was on board stationed at one of the areas to ensure that the distribution went well. So we have a number of players coming on board to ensure that this program is a success.
Okay, very good initiative. We take another break now, and when we come back, we continue the discussion on the National Meals Program. Stay tuned.
Cette lisi ka enregistré vers min corona ek I ka fait mouvement ek an chay vitesse tan chaque canef ka kouye pour viligence publique la fait wolo parler en place publique kon bon lanme base ti boutique changer distance sociale 6 pieds hod yon a lot I ka travay tan si ou senti ko pa cordial quarantine ko patwe contact epi lot en ka ou te tope exposé si an ekouye free 11 ou ben n'importe clinique yo pou les pays a dimi a clé ça vle di les supermarkets pharmacie epi ATM yo accessible avant 7 souhait pays a clé en plein ça vle di tout bagay fermé à 24 heures servi protocole comme sorti par bureau indication santé nous tout ensemble ça sauver vers min corona si nous tout servi jidla à toutes les
Together let us win this war. Said Lucia be a soldier. Together we can beat this corona.
And welcome back. Today we are discussing the National Meals Program as part of St. Lucia's national response to COVID-19. Before we continue, let us take in this report from the Office of the Prime Minister on the National Meals Program.
The government of St. Lucia continues its strategic response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which includes taking care of the most vulnerable in our society. Prime Minister Honorable Alan Chasney announced in the Social Stabilization Plan that hot meals prepared by chefs and cooks from hotels and restaurants are part of the new National Meals Program, which began on Easter Sunday.
The SLHTA is also collaborating with the Ministry of Agriculture, other private sector associations, non-governmental and service organizations to undertake a national meals program. The first phase of the program will begin this Easter Sunday with a limited rollout. However, the program will eventually feed up to 5,000 underprivileged persons who are on that singular list on a daily basis using produce from our local farmers.
The National Meals Program, spearheaded by the St. Lucia Hotel Tourism Authority, together with the Ministry of Agriculture, saw the opening up of hotel kitchens for the preparation of food to be distributed throughout the length and breadth of the island. The soul of this project are the many farmers and fishers who will get a market for their produce during this time of uncertainty. CEO of SLHTA, Nurani Aziz, expressed that this National Meals Program is an excellent example of public and private sector collaboration, provides an opportunity for the hospitality industry to keep active and to give back to the country.
The SLHTA essentially reached out to a number of our hotels which have since been closed and a few other restaurants as well as kitchens around the island to enlist their support to donate their time and their resources to literally cook and prepare the meals and to prep them for distribution and consumption. In addition to that, we also assisted in costing out the meals and presented the various ministries with the necessary information regarding the procurement needs as well as the volume of ingredients to serve as inputs to the meal preparation. We also assisted in enlisting the support of a few tourism transportation providers who assisted in transporting the ingredients from point A to point B.
The National Emergency Management Organization, NEMO, was responsible for logistics and dispatch and worked closely with the Ministry of Social Transformation in ensuring that meals reach those in need.
The initiative took off very well. We were able to get the food to the various drop-off points. Castries, for instance, the Castries City Council was responsible for delivering to the various communities within the Castries area. A total of 15 hotels took part. Their Bay Gardens, Jake's in Rodney Bay, Sandals Grand, Serenity Vacation, Coco Palm, Landings, Windjammer, June Catering, Pink Papaya, Rendezvous, Marigo Bay Resort, Moyan S, Ladera Resort, Jade Mountain, Fordu, and Coconut Bay. All of these hotels came together to provide the meals for those persons. We would like to thank also the Cadet Corps who came on board to deliver these meals to the various communities. They did a wonderful job in getting those meals to those persons. And so NEMO, together with the Cadet Corps, Event St. Lucia and SLHTA came together to ensure that those meals get out to those persons who were in need of the meal on Easter Sunday. I believe that this initiative is a great one. It will continue.
The National Meals Program is just one of the initiatives by the government to provide relief and to keep St. Lucia's economy going. Reporting for the Office of the Prime Minister, I am Danielle Dubois.
And thank you, Danielle, for that report. In studio with me, Mrs. Lorraine Sidonie, CEO of Events Company St. Lucia, and Dorine Gustave, Director of NEMO. A year or two ago, we'll be discussing jazz coming up, right? Coming into me. But we're here in different times, different discussion, talking about the National Meals Program. And just so that no one is left out, because we've been talking about so many different agencies, groups, and persons involved. Just go over some of the persons, well, not some, as many of the persons and organizations involved in this very extensive program.
Okay, sure. So there are three main ministries involved. We've got Ministry of Social Equity, Ministry of Agriculture, and Ministry of Tourism. And of course, we have the Office of the Prime Minister. So they are spearheading the program. Under Ministry of Tourism, you've got the Events Company of St. Lucia and the hotels and SLHTA. Under social equity, you've got the local government, the councils, the social transformation officers, and the National Volunteer Program as well. And again, I want to say hi to Jenny Sincroix because she has just been phenomenal. I call her and it's like, no problem, I'm here to serve. Wow. Yeah, so I mean, and she's one of many, you know, I don't want to be accused of singling out anybody, but it's just such fantastic attitudes I've witnessed, you know, and I guess that's what crisis does. And I know I'm digressing a bit, Tony, forgive me, but it's really moved me to mention that what I've seen going on in the kitchens, what I've seen going on at the communities, you know, man, St. Lucia is in good hands. Yes.
And I think that's what COVID have exposed a lot of good in our people.
Yes.
Yes, you have some pimples here and there, but generally we see the goodness of our people coming forward, persons willing to volunteer and participate and to donate, the generosity of our people, even though we are all going through the same thing in different ways.
Yes,
you know?
Of course. Of course. And this National Meals Program, so it's serving a lot of objectives and it's bringing out the best. And the collaboration we're seeing is fantastic. So we've got the Disaster Preparedness Committee. We hadn't even mentioned them, but I know they fall under NEMO and the Cadet Corps. We spoke about that aspect as well. Have I missed any? I really don't want to, but there are so many players all working together. I mean, it's a well-tuned machine happening here to make, in the first instance, 3,000 meals available to the vulnerables. Yesterday, 3,600, but the goal is 5,000. And what is happening, as much as you would be tempted to think that there's a stagnant list we're working with, it's forever fine-tuning.
Okay.
We're adding persons. You know, we have to do 5,000. I mean, the Prime Minister would like to see 5,000 a day. That's our aim then. So we're constantly adding persons, making sure that we're capturing as wide as possible the persons that are in need of
so if
daily
someone
needs.
is aware of a person or an individual who's not captured by that number, who could they call? Who could they reach out to?
I think the best advice would be to go through local government.
The local
definitely.
councils and what have you.
Exactly.
Indeed, and we also like the group that we left out is that group that that lose their job during the especially the hotel workers who were on the margin of poverty, the brink of poverty. And then just this event would cause them to go immediately into poverty. Those are persons who would not be able to provide for their family right away, especially single-headed, let me say female.
Because that's what the report is saying. You know, a lot of women are going to be impacted by this global pandemic and the world food hunger we've been faced with.
Indeed. So we have to deal with, we cannot leave them out.
Yes. And I was also happy to hear the Minister for Education mention that the school feeding program, even though those children are now at home, that they have found a way to continue that program to provide for those children who, as you mentioned, some of the parents are unemployed and finding difficulty providing for those children while they're at home. We know we're talking about a national meals program, but you have quite an extensive portfolio. Let us talk about the reopening just for a little bit, the construction center. And I broke the news to you when you came in here this morning that, you know, the minister had just spoken about persons moving from Vieux-Fort to Castries and vice versa, as well as Soufrière. So you're going to have an additional number of persons coming to NEMO calling NEMO for passes. Let's just talk about that situation for a bit and how you're dealing with it.
So just to establish that it has not stopped at all. We have not had a period where persons have not come for passes. So persons who would want to cross the zone to bring food for their parents who's living down south or up north, medication and so on, will come to us. Some persons who maybe have their farm in the south and because they need to cross the zone, they will come to us and would issue them that temporary pass. With the announcement of the reopening of the construction sector, this morning the lines were all around the NEMO building. So I expect that to get even more during the coming days. So we have to cater to those persons at NEMO. It doesn't end. And we also have to prepare for the upcoming hurricane season and to deal with the drought.
A reminder that we are facing those situations
so we
as well.
we have not been on pause at all. We have been going and going and going and going. So it is quite, okay, NEMO has its work cut out for it. We have quite an extensive area to deal with, and so we are doing our best to put all of the measures in place to deal with all that come our way.
And indeed, you guys are doing your best,
we are.
I must say. Any final words from you?
For me, I would like to thank all of those persons who have come on board to ensure that this National Meals Program is a success. We are continuing, like you've heard, Wednesday and Friday of this week, and so it is something that we have our hearts in, and I know those persons who are on board are persons who are really looking forward to this thing being a success, to ensuring that the meals get to those persons who are in need, and this is coming out of a heart of love. So I want to thank St. Lucia, thank everyone who've come together to ensure that this National Meals Program is a success.
And of course, I'd just like to say thanks as well. I mean, really reiterating what Mrs. Gustave said. You know, thank you to everyone for your support. Thank you for being so selfless, for giving, for showing what we're made of in a time when we need the resilience and the help from each and everyone. Thank you for coming on board and making the National Meals Program a success, and we'll continue to make it a success.
Indeed.
And thanks to both of you for being here and for responding to the call. Before we leave, just a few reminders. From tomorrow, the estimates will be laid out in Parliament. Before that, we will be having the throne speech live right here on NTN. Of course, Parliament has also agreed to extend the state of emergency until May 31st, 2020, and we are still under 10-hour curfew, 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. St. Lucia has a total of 15 confirmed cases of COVID-19, and all of these positive cases of COVID in St. Lucia have fully recovered. This now places St. Lucia at 100% recovery of all cases. However, the CMO continues to remind us that we are not out of the woods as yet. Modified testing continues, and an increased number of samples are being tested. We ask you to continue to be your brother's keeper, your brother and sister's keeper, and we are all in this together, and believe that this too shall pass and that things will indeed get better. Thank you for joining us.
Land of beaches, valleys and hills, only together we can rebuild my island home. No place like home, my island home.
Seems like yesterday, everything was fine, yeah, we believe in good. It was an average day, always getting by how we could. Oh, what a sudden change, everything rearranged. St. Lucia looking strange, nothing feels the same.
We gotta have hope and faith, watch every step we take. We can't look down, don't look back, look up for brighter days.
Carry on,
get up, let's go.
Carry on,
it's time to grow.
Carry on, I know things will get better one day. Carry on, it's time to go. Carry on, get up and go. Carry on, I know things will get better.
Pick up the nurses, all the doctors, all the police, all the reporters in this pandemic, natural disaster. Pray for we, all the pastors. Be wise, sanitize, don't touch your face, don't touch your eyes. Distance, don't socialize. We live in it some serious.